Happy Rosh Chodesh to everyone. If you hear me, give me a thumbs up. Great. Okay, technology is working today. So here in California, it's 1:40, and some other parts of the world where my fellow sisters are, it's 4 in the afternoon or 9 in the evening. So we're not going to say good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. We're going to say a happy Rosh Chodesh. Today is Rosh Chodesh, the first day of the Hebrew month of Sivan. It was on this day, 3,332 years ago, that the Jews arrived at Har Sinai, at Mount Sinai, to receive the Torah. In describing their encampment at this time, the Torah uses a singular terminology for the entire nation, Vayichan, like the nation encamped. And Rashi, the foremost commentator of the Torah, comments on this with the expression, Ke'ish echad belev echad, like one man with one heart. Although usually 2 Jews have 3 opinions, at this time, they were all in line with one another as they prepared to receive the greatest gift of all, the Torah. In that spirit, we prepare to receive the Torah once again this week, and we are uniting globally with you, our communities. I thank Hashem for many brachas, among them the blessing of siblings, and thanks to my wonderfully dedicated parents, many of them, thank God. Some of us, and I'm sure others are wondering, and we've spent a lifetime fielding these kinds of questions. Yes, we're all from the same set of parents, thank God. And since you've seen a picture of us sisters, we also have 7 brothers. Now that we have that out the way, and you're all informed, at least for that part of the deal, the rest of those questions will be for another time. Each one of us, sisters, wear many hats, and in our respective communities, we juggle many responsibilities. We often WhatsApp each other, call with questions and how-tos for activities that we do, that we share in common. This is our sisterhood. Several weeks ago, we came up with this idea, and cautiously but unanimously, we agreed to create today's event. Yesterday was the Yahrzeit, the day of passing of our paternal grandmother, who passed away 56 years ago, 2 weeks before our oldest brother was born. We grew up hearing stories of her being ahead of her time in so many things. She was devoted to her family, husband, and 8 children, which was considered large in the standards of those times. Theirs was a home of laughter and joy, appreciation for their tradition, each other, and their blessings. It was warm and welcoming, and all types of people were drawn to it and welcomed inside. Our Bubby was sophisticated, talented, and well-rounded, and imbued her children with strong values. She was loved by all. Her mother, my father's grandmother, lived upstairs from them in her later years, and the special bond that mother and daughter shared was legendary. I feel privileged to carry both my grandmother's name, Yenta, together with the name of her mother, Chaya, fusing those 2 special people. When we shared the idea with our father initially, he was touched, and he mentioned how his mother would definitely have appreciated it. It would have been something she would have approved of. We didn't go into too many details, but we could figure out some of them. We thank our husbands for allowing and encouraging us to do this, and also supporting some of our other sisterhood activities. Appreciation also goes to our parents, of course, and our brothers and sisters-in-law for cheering us on, supporting and encouraging us. And of course, our own children. We are grateful for the people in our communities, all of you, our friends and family who have joined us today. And now, on with the task at hand. Kabbalah teaches us that Hashem created the world with 10 creative powers. These 10 are divided into 3 intellectual or mind attributes and 7 emotional, and they're called the Sefirot. Why do we choose this topic? We're not Kabbalists, but it's very connected to the time period that we're in. The time period between Pesach and Shavuos is a total of 50 days, and we count 49 days from when the Jews left Egypt till they arrived at time of giving the Torah. And the counting was from anticipation, but also it was a process of perfecting themselves or moving out of the slave mentality into the mentality of a people ready to forge a bond with God like no other. These 49 days are days that we typically, we're counting the Omer, and we typically focus on these 7 attributes, 7 emotional ones. So just to make it clear, the first 3, Chachma, Bina, Da'as, which is wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, also the acronym for Chabad, are the intellectual tracks or powers. Those are not the ones we're going to focus on today, primarily because these 7 weeks are about the emotional powers and the balance that we work on to prepare ourselves to receive the Torah. I'm going to just share a very brief outline. My sisters are going to explain it further, but I want to just mention 2 things. One of them is that these are each one, this whole topic could be a course for a year at least. Each one of these creative powers could take several hours, which we don't have today. And we can't possibly do justice to them in an hour. So our goal was to give an overview, something that would give us all thoughts to ponder and perhaps a desire to go further in our study of this. And also, you might be wondering why I got up first. So I want to share something else that connects right in with Kabbalah and is fascinating in its own right. When we decided to do this, how are we going to divide the roles, which is the 7 emotional attributes and the introduction? We decided to leave it in God's hands, as it were. And Kabbalah teaches us that everything that happens is divine intervention. So we drew lots, you know, good old fashioned, put the names in a bucket, draw them out. And our sister Hannah did it, and she shared with us the results. And we were all floored because our objective was to find a connecting point to the Sefirah that we would get. And we just found how it resonated. And this has been in itself a very interesting experience as we studied together and frenziedly helped each other with different aspects to our presentation. So there are 7 emotional attributes, and the goal is these 7 weeks between Pesach and Shavuos, we focus on each week on one of these creative powers, these emotions. But it's not just 7 weeks. We count every single day, and we count the days and the weeks. So we're taught that each one of these 7 emotions on its own needs to be coupled with another, so that each week we focus on one, and each day of that week we focus on one with another one. So it's really a concept of unifying these attributes to create that perfect balance. So that's what's happening today. I will now give over the floor and introduce the first sister who will explain the attribute. We are going to go through this not necessarily in order of age, because that's how it landed, but each one will introduce the other. And when we're finished, we have a special guest presentation or people that you'll probably want to hear from. And then we'll also open up the floor to everyone everyone's on mute right now. We'll open up the floor if people want to ask questions or want to participate when we're done with the formal presentation. So thank you again. And now it's my great pleasure to call on my sister Tiki Kaplan from Pennsylvania, who's gonna take it away with the first midah of Chesed.
And thanks, Chaya. So, hi everybody. I'll go right into speaking of our grandmother in whose honor we have come together today. About a year before she passed away, she had an audience with the Rebbe. When our father visited the Rebbe some weeks later, the Rebbe asked why his mother had looked unwell. He didn't know what to answer, as he hadn't thought she wasn't well. The Rebbe said he should repeat the conversation to his mother and to tell her to take good care of herself. When he did so that night, his father was very surprised, but his mother whispered, "I see that he knows what nobody else knows." She was seeing a doctor privately for diabetes, but hadn't shared that because she didn't want to worry anyone. The doctor only told the family after she passed away. In order to be able to care for others, one must make sure not to neglect oneself. We can learn about this concept more deeply when we examine the Sefirot of Chesed. Chesed is defined as kindness, grace, generosity, the ability to share and to feel love. Love is the emotion we feel when we give. Of all the emotions with which to experience the world, love is the most basic. It lies at the heart of everything else, and from it, all other emotions branch out. So, on our journey of transformation, working through the emotions to refine ourselves, Chesed is the first step, stepping out of our boundaries to open up our hearts to the flow of both giving and receiving. So what does it mean to work on Chesed? A verse in Tehillim, Psalms, states, "The world will be built with Chesed," referring to the loving kindness that Hashem used in the process of creation and which he permeated all of creation with. The Hebrew word for love, ahava, and the Hebrew word for one, echad, have the same numerical value of 13. So love and oneness are bound together. Our work is to connect and become one with Hashem, to others, to creation, by becoming givers, emulating the way that Hashem gives to us. Chesed, giving, in its truest form, means a pouring, uninterrupted flow. It's like when you turn on a tap. First, a trickle comes out, and then it starts to flow. And that's the pouring, the giving. Even if there's no recipient, you still want to give. True giving is when there is no transaction involved. It's not about the recipient or receiving something as a result, but rather it's about how can I give and keep giving, and then through that giving, I am being my truest self, I am connecting, and I am vitalized. Only when we know how to give and when we are fully prepared to give of ourselves, can we also receive. Giving is to open the heart. But opening the heart can be very challenging. We often want to do what feels comfortable externally, which may or may not be the right thing for our soul and for our true feeling of love that we have within. To begin the opening of our hearts and allow the flow of love to give it, to receive it to its fullest extent, we must gather our resources and examine inside our very selves. Ask ourselves some questions about the extent and nature of our love. Why do I feel vulnerable to express myself? Why might I not relate to someone else? Which leads us to understand that Chesed begins with self-love. It begins with turning within and knowing that the first person that I should be giving to, who is deserving, is me. And only by doing that can we truly be giving to others. Each trait is represented by a biblical figure who exemplifies that quality. Our forefather Abraham was the embodiment of Chesed and effusion, so much so that even when he had nobody else to receive what he was putting out there, he put it out there anyway. Abraham related totally to Hashem's giving and Hashem's greatness, and in every situation of his life and every struggle and challenge that he faced, his feeling was one of absolute love for Hashem. He emulated Hashem's loving kindness and was dedicated to giving and sharing with generosity. He invited everyone he met into his tent to give them sustenance, and he taught them that there is one God. In the Torah, it recounts that after Abraham circumcised himself, which was understandably very challenging at the age of 99, Hashem caused the heat to be so intense so that it wouldn't allow any visitors to come by and disturb Abraham. Abraham sat outside all day and was disappointed and upset, not because he was in pain, but because he wanted to know, where are my guests? Where are my people? That's what gives me the strength to keep going. That's what I need to be my true self. He still felt the need to be giving and giving and giving, because he knew that when you begin to open a door, a tiny crack, it then opens wider and wider. And not only are you letting things effuse out forward, but you're also enabling yourself to receive. Every year for our grandmother's yahrzeit, the extended family makes a memorial gathering, after which someone will write up what was shared. Looking through the write-ups of many years, the main theme that carries through year after year is how she was the epitome of chesed in all areas of her life, in all her relationships, be it with family, friends, community, or strangers. She loved people and always hosted guests. She remembered guests' favorite foods. Her home was a second home to out-of-town students, and she was a second mother to many. Her home was known as Grand Central Station because people were always coming, staying, and going. No person who ever asked for help walked away empty-handed. The fact that this event is being held the day after her yahrzeit and in her honor couldn't be more perfect, for everything she embodied inspires all of us to use her as an example of how to be open to treating all with respect and worthy of loving kindness and care. As she was, and we all are, really emulating Hashem's chesed with us. Now, to walk us through how our chesed must be channeled, we turn to my sister, Shendel Shapiro, for the next Sefirot of Gevurah.
Hi, everyone. We just heard about love, chesed, so beautifully. And love, as we heard, is the base of human expression. And I'm now going to segue into the second midah, the second attribute, which is Gevurah. And among others, Gevurah covers concepts such as discipline, restraint, justice, limits, and awe. Loving kindness is wonderful, but without the discipline involved, the love could be overwhelming, it could be suffocating even, and if it's not guided, it can even be dangerous. And this is where Gevurah comes in. Gevurah is the channel through which we express our love in order to maintain a healthy relationship. So let's look at some examples. Here I have a picture of water. And as we all know, water is life-giving, it is a blessing, it is a kindness. But if I just pour the water right here, I'll end up with a flood in this gorgeous room. So instead, I take my cup, pour my water in, and the cup gives my water form and a boundary in order for it to be utilized in a healthy way, like drinking. So Gevurah, like the cup in my example, gives chesed, the water, boundaries, which enables the chesed flow to be appropriate and to be in a form that can be accepted. And in the same way, a good teacher who limits the flow of information so that it matches the capacity of her students, as I hope I'm doing right now, is also practicing the midah of Gevurah. We're going to now look at another example. Here I have my next prop, which is a knife, and it looks pretty sharp. Now imagine if my child, Batsheva Yenta, her name is actually, imagine, and she's almost 3 years old, imagine if she wanted to play with this knife. Or imagine if a child wants to run into the street or doesn't want to wear a seatbelt on a highway. Well, chesed is all about giving. So should I give my child the knife? And logic, and actually true love, dictates that in this case, I use my Gevurah muscle. And I withhold the knife, I pull my child off the street, and I restrain my child with the seatbelt, because we recognize that in order to raise healthy, safe adults, we need to discipline our children and give them structure. And by the way, discipline is not only for children, it's something we all are applying in our own lives, hopefully. When you are organized, when you are using your time in an efficient way, when you have self-control, that's you using your Gevurah, your discipline. Gevurah really gives our life that, and also our love, that direction, that focus, that intensity that we so much need, especially in our fast-paced world today. Think about a laser beam. Rather than fragmented light beams that are dispersed in all different directions, the laser beam concentrates light in one direction. And that allows for focused healing, for more powerful energies that can really go far. So Gevurah, in that same way as the laser beam, concentrates our efforts, our love, our work, our encounters in the proper directions. One final aspect of Gevurah that I want to touch upon today is awe. Just as love is a product of chesed, Gevurah is a product of, fear is a product of Gevurah. The Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism, whose yahrzeit, whose day of passing is in just a few days on Shavuot, relates that when he was a very, very young child, both of his parents passed away. And right before his father passed away, his father said to him, Yisrael, my beloved son, I want you to remember these two things for your entire life. Number one, fear no one. Fear nothing in this world. Only fear Hashem, the God of heaven and earth. And number two, love every single Jew with all your heart and soul. Hashem wants us to fear him, but it's not fear in the way we think of. It's not in a way of, I'm so afraid. Rather, that we appreciate Hashem's greatness and are awed by it to the extent that we don't think of ourselves as independent of Hashem. But the funny thing is that most people think that instead of letting go and letting God and, the one who created everything, people think it's safer to take matters into their own hands and we'll manage our lives independently. And guess what happens? We fear everything else. We're afraid of the coronavirus. We're afraid we're going to be sick. We're afraid we're not going to have enough money. We're afraid of public speaking. So many paranoias and anxieties. On March 12th of this year, the buzz around coronavirus was becoming extremely, awfully loud. And the state that I'm in New Jersey, had not yet closed. But with all the news coming in, I can still feel that emotion right now. I was feeling so overwhelmed. I felt such a sense of responsibility for all the decisions I had to make for the students in our preschool. And everything was changing literally by the minute. The news just kept changing. And I felt such a total lack of control, as if my entire foundation of having it together was crumbling. The unknown is really scary. Whoever was near me that day can vouch for this. I was just really anxious and fearful like I'd never been. And that night, I had an epiphany. You are not in charge, Shandel, and you never were. And I cannot tell you how liberating that thought was. And yes, of course, I always knew this. But the question is, do I internalize it? I don't have to worry or fear anyone or anything in this world, because I have the awe of Hashem. He's in charge, not me. So let's embrace this. Let's feel the awesomeness of Hashem, of God. If that's our guiding light, we'll be freed of all other anxieties. Let's work that Gevurah. We have got this. And now, it is with immense pleasure that I introduce my younger sister. She's younger than me, but she inspires me daily, Chevy Bigler of Manhattan.
Thank you, Shandel. It is an honor, really, to be here today presenting together with my sisters, my best friends. There is a raging debate happening right now in America. Some people want to reopen this country and get back to life. Yet others feel that it would be unsafe and we should stay home in isolation. The third Sefirah, Tiferet, is translated as harmony, beauty, compassion, empathy, balance, truth. I know, that's a long translation, but there is no one adjective that truly describes Tiferet. Not to be political or anything, this is just an example. Tiferet enters into this debate and mediates. He listens to both opposing sides, of Chesed, who wants to open this country, and Gevurah, who wants the country to remain in lockdown. Tiferet brings truth to the table and merges these two ideas. He says, let's open the country, like the opinion of Chesed, but there needs to be discipline, rules put into place on how to open, so that it's done safely and beautifully. Tiferet is the ability to find balance, bringing a new harmonious outcome. The Rambam, Maimonides, teaches that a person should always live a life of balance and not go to extremes. There's a Hasidic story told of a king who had the two closest friends who unfortunately rebelled against the kingdom. The king could not possibly bring himself to kill his two good friends, so he decided to put the outcome in their hands. The king told the prisoners to walk across a high tightrope to their freedom. Their chances of survival were slim, yet the first prisoner miraculously survived. The second prisoner called out to his friend and asked, "How did you do it? Help me." The friend responded, "Whenever I felt myself beginning to fall to one side, I didn't wait until I was all the way over to that side, but I immediately compensated into the other direction, thereby creating balance." When I was given the third Sefirah to present, I wasn't sure how it connected with me. 3 was never really my number. Well, up until I gave birth to our triplets, and now I can only think in 3s. But in Jewish life, the number 3 is actually considered the perfect number, and I do love the idea of balance. Today, we begin the third Hebrew month of Sivan, the month where we received the Torah and entered into our marriage with God. Everything that happens in our relationship with God is a mirror a lesson for us in our own relationships, our relationships with our spouses, our relationships at work, our relationships with our children. Why did God wait until this 3rd month to give us the Torah and not give it to us right away? Let's take a look at this number 3 in connection to relationships. Number 1 represents unity, but there is no one else. Number 2 represents the idea of 2 opposing parties fighting against each other. 3 represents the idea of a triangle, where we blend the 2 separate entities and bring them up to a point where we create the strongest geometric. So, how do we achieve this perfect emotional balance of Tiferet? We're going to break it down into 3 steps, and I've created an acronym to help guide us. T-E-C, tech. The T of tech stands for time out. Time out are not only for children. We have to step away from what comes naturally to us and reassess. When my husband heard that the sisters had chosen this Kabbalistic topic to give over, he argued that this topic is too lofty and we should pick something more personal and down to earth. I disagreed, since I felt that while the Sefirot are deep, I knew that we would give it over in a contemporary and relatable way. My husband and I both thought that our perspective was the right approach, possibly because of our different personalities, upbringings, and past experiences. In order to connect and accept others, we need to pause. This willingness to be truly honest and to scrape away our ego is the first step to us achieving Tiferet. Now we go to the next step. The E in tech stands for empathy. Early this morning, 2 of my children were fighting. One child told another, "Don't look at me." I mean, seriously? Someone must have looked at him, because in his frustration, he threw the couch pillows across the room. I was taking deep breaths when suddenly the same child went slipping across the floor on that pillow that he had thrown. Forgive me if my first thought was, wow, karma really is alive. But I practiced compassion in feeling for him, because true compassion is limitless, and it means giving even when you don't think someone deserves it. And finally, the C of tech, T-E-C, we have the C, stands for connectivity. In order to have authentic connections, we need to make room for other people's opinions and perspectives. Like my discussion with my husband, I welcomed his discussion because without communication, the connection is superficial. When we are able to take 2 different opinions and come to a balanced partnership in a number of 3, well, let me just say that is beauty, and that is Tiferet. I would now like to introduce my sister Golda Eunuch, all the way from Hendon, England, to introduce the next Sefirah. Golda, you're up. Take it away.
Thank you, Chevy. So, when I was told that the emotion that the lottery had chosen for me was Netzach, I was floored. Emotion number 4, and I am child number 4. Netzach is an emotion that I truly relate to. I am passionate about my family. I go to the end of the world for any of them. I am ambitious and driven to perfection when it comes to supporting my community or my students. The Zohar explains that Netzach is rooted in the essence of the soul. A person has an idea, it develops into an emotion, and then when one moves on to a different area, one is left with Netzach, which represents the determination to act. It is a commitment that is stronger than the original emotion. It means to be driven by what counts. It's the readiness to fight for what you believe. It's the victory, the success of crossing the threshold of self and stepping into someone else's space. It is the fortitude, the confidence, and the patience to follow through on your passions. It relates to healthy leadership, the ability to influence others and motivate them to act. It is the readiness to fight for what you believe. Everyone has ambition and determination. We have the capacity to endure much more than we imagine and to prevail under the most trying circumstances. I have great role models to whom I aspire and look up to. My dear parents, my grandparents, who trace their lineage all the way back to a leader, a king, David HaMelech, King David, whose birthday and yahrzeit are coming up in a few days on Shavuos. David HaMelech was a descendant of Yehuda. He was also the great-great-grandson of Rus, the Moabite convert to Judaism. In addition, he was a shepherd, not the most royal of occupations. So why did Hashem choose him as king over Yisrael? David was not chosen king despite his lineage and his work with sheep, but because of it. Hashem appointed a shepherd for his flock, someone sensitive to all Jews, the nobleman, the rich, and the commoner alike. Because of who he was and where he came from, David would care for all classes of society. Everyone mattered to him. Let me allow you to glimpse a very powerful moment when the prophet Shmuel told King Shaul that Hashem was choosing David as the next king. The paradigm of Malchus. He said, Netzach Yisrael lo yishaker. The eternal one of Israel will not lie, which emphasizes durability, consistency, and eternity of Netzach. What we find most prominent and obvious in David is the Netzach aspect of Malchus. He is one of the most well-known figures in Jewish history. His life was filled with much happiness and much pain. He is known by many titles: David the Conqueror, David the Pious Man, David the Sweet Singer, David the Shepherd. David never forgot his humble beginnings. He never became an arrogant king. He spent his life inspiring others and gifting us, his children, throughout all further generations with the book of Tehillim, Psalms. Since my childhood, I always enjoyed singing, and I have fond memories of sitting Shabbos afternoon, singing and harmonizing with my mother and sisters. This is something I try to do with my own daughters. To me, music is a way to relax, to connect with one's inner self. David used the Tehillim and music as a portal through which we can glimpse his inner self, his thoughts, his feelings. He was a man of great passion, faith, and optimism. David faced numerous personal struggles and adversity, in addition to challenges to his leadership. Many times, his difficulties seemed completely overwhelming, allowing him little chance of survival. And yet, David doesn't give up hope. His inner strength and optimistic outlook for a brighter future comes from his knowledge that he is not alone. Many of us may be familiar with the word laminatseach, to the choir master or the conductor, a direct derivative of netzach, which is used repeatedly in Tehillim. The implication of the word is not power or victory, rather example setting and facilitating. Maybe there's a lesson in understanding true success. Yes, there are indeed enemies to be fought, but here and now, our success lies in our being role models of our dedicated service to Hashem. Practically speaking, at times when I find myself overwhelmed by the many roles in my life, as a wife, a mother, a grandmother, my shlichus in the Beis Gabriel community, and in Lubavitch Senior Girls School in London, I pause for a moment, I take a step back, and I reflect on my mission and my purpose. Leadership, whether at home or in communal matters, is about netzach, is about endurance, confidence, passion, determination. It isn't a quick fix. It comes with patience, with the knowledge that there will be challenging moments. But these are all stepping stones and part of the journey. As in the case of David HaMelech, it is these encounters that make us the leaders who we are. I have loved this challenge. Working together with my sisters has been, as it always is, full of thrill and fun. Feeding off each other's drive and energy has been rejuvenating. And it is now my pleasure to hand over to our youngest sister, Cheved Greenwald of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Golda. At a dinner celebrating the work of the community rabbi, the guest speaker applauded the rabbi's many qualities, his hard work, his enthusiasm, and dedication to his community. As he sat down, the rabbi mentioned, "You forgot one thing." "What was that?" asked the guest speaker. The rabbi whispered, "Humility, my humility." When I was assigned the Sefirot of Hod, my mind went fondly to the song I learned as a young child in preparation for Shavuos, about all the mountains vying for God's attention. They all felt like they were the most suitable mountain for the Torah to be given on. But little Har Sinai stood on the side, and she didn't even bother trying. She knew she was too small, wasn't wide or tall enough, but Hashem chose Mount Sinai because she didn't think herself as better than anyone else. Her humility. Hod, commonly explained as humility, the fifth attribute that completes the refinement of oneself. The biblical character who the Kabbalists say personifies Hod is Aaron HaKohen, Moshe's oldest brother, who was the high priest. His mantra in life was to love peace and pursue peace. It is impossible to make peace between people without being able to listen to both sides. Aaron was the great mediator in Jewish history, listening to both sides with a full heart, no preconceived notions, and helping both sides leave with the feeling that they won. Aaron was also the person who led the Jews in Egypt for decades before Moshe came. And yet, when Moshe, his younger brother, returned, he put his ego aside for the greater good. He reassured the Jews that Moshe was a good guy and accepted his brother's leadership. Aaron's humility allowed him to yield and submit to his superior, the quality of Hod. But let's not think humility is being passive. It doesn't mean that I am nothing, that we can't be beautiful, smart, successful, have good traits and abilities. It means we understand we are talented and have so much to offer, but we know that our strengths and talents come from a higher place, and that gives us the power to go far beyond what we feel we are capable of. Humility means I do not need to compare myself to others. I have my task and they have theirs. We need to cooperate, not compete. Humility is self turned outward. There are other aspects to the Sefirot of Hod that I would like to explain, and that brings me to Lag BaOmer, the 33rd day of the Omer, which we celebrated 2 weeks ago. The day whose energy is Hod within Hod, humility within humility. Rabbi Akiva was a 40-year-old unlearned shepherd who didn't even know the Aleph Beis. One day, as he was drawing water, he noticed these little indents in a rock, and he wondered aloud who had carved a hole in the stone. The people around him explained that it was from the continuous flow of water dripping on it day after day. He realized that if a hard object can be changed over time by drops of water, how much more so can he be affected and changed by the Torah, even in his older age? With the encouragement of his wife, Rachel, he went to learn in a yeshiva, starting with the basics, and eventually became one of the greatest scholars and leaders of his generation. He built a huge academy with thousands of students who came from far and near. And then calamity hit. 24,000 students died within a month. On the powerful day of Lag BaOmer, they stopped dying. Rabbi Akiva's yeshiva was essentially wiped out. So many of his students had died, and he was left devastated. He was much older at this point. He could have easily given up. I've done my duty, time for me to retire. But no, he still had what to give. So he started to rebuild a new group. He found himself 5 new students, and he was able to continue spreading his teachings and the important transmission of the oral Torah. Hod is commitment, acceptance. Rabbi Akiva wasn't giving up his mission so easily. He accepted his challenges, but picked himself up from his low and committed to start again. What was it that Rabbi Akiva's students did that caused this catastrophic event? The Talmud tells us that they didn't honor and respect one another. But how could it be that Rabbi Akiva's students didn't internalize his main teaching of loving your fellow? The Lubavitcher Rebbe expounds that they loved each other so much that they couldn't fathom that their friends were not understanding their teacher's words in the way that they felt was right. The possibility that someone else might have a different understanding, and they lost respect for each other. The Hasidic masters give a deeper meaning to Hod, acknowledgement. We acknowledge someone else. They can have their opinion, their view and beliefs, even if it is different from ours. Hod is acknowledging and experiencing the glory of others. The word Hod comes from the same root as Maida, thanks, and Haida'ah, gratitude. We acknowledge that someone did something for us. We are secure enough in our identity that we can come from a place of vulnerability and show our gratitude. We surrender and open ourselves to allow others in. When we show humility, when we embody Hod, we invite others into our lives. And it can all start with a simple thank you. I would now like to pass the mic across the state of Pennsylvania to my beautiful sister Chana in Reading.
Thank you, Chaved. So when my husband first started to work at a rehab center for addiction about 22 years ago, he returned one evening very shaken up. One of the patients he had visited with was a man in his 60s, and he was talking about the trauma he experienced at the age of 10, 11, 12 years old. We had heard many shocking stories before this and since, but what was compelling about his story was that the man was still stuck on what had transpired all those years back. His entire foundation of his life was shattered, leading him on a path of destruction. A foundation is so fundamental. We often ask ourselves the question, who are we and what defines us? Is it what people think about us? Is it our jobs that make us who we are? Our families? What is our foundation? It's time now to essentially connect the ideas that you've heard thus far and combine them into a recipe, so to say, to create a clear picture. With a recipe, if even one ingredient is missing, it doesn't yield the perfect product. But when all the ingredients are brought together in a bowl, it creates the right balance, which leads me into the discussion of the 6 of the emotional powers of the soul, Yesod. Literally, Yesod means foundation, but it's often translated also as bonding. It's our ability to connect with others, the world, and God. Just as the foundation of a building is an extension of the edifice, plunging deep into the earth and enabling the building to stand, so too, our faculty of bonding enables us to connect deeply with others. Sometimes, we facilitate a connection by being like the metal underpinning going deep down into the ground. At other times, we're like the earth itself, making space for another. Either way, we're activating our soul's ability to connect. Whether you're a 60-year-old man who needs to repair their cracked foundation, or a young person just beginning life, and of course all in between, we can all achieve this attribute. We are all born with the faculty of bonding intact. And then we are driven by a need for connection. We deeply want to engage with others. We want to allow them to become part of our lives and enter into their world in a way that enriches us all. Bonding is the ultimate emotional connection. while the first 5 qualities that my sisters have so eloquently expounded upon, love, discipline, compassion, endurance, and humility, are all interactive, the emphasis of them is on an individual's feeling, not necessarily on mutuality. Bonding, on the other hand, is a complete fusion of the two, or of two. Without bonding, no feeling can be truly realized. Bonding means connecting, not only feeling for another, but being attached to them. Not just a token commitment, but total devotion. It creates a channel between the giver and the receiver. It is like the foundation of life, the emotional spine of the human psyche. Every person needs bonding to flourish and grow. The bonding between mother and child, between husband and wife, between brothers and sisters, between only sisters, as you see today, what sisters can get up together, between close friends. Bonding is affirmation. It gives one the sense of belonging, that I matter, that I'm important, that I'm significant. It establishes trust in ourselves, trust in others, and it also instills confidence. Without bonding and nurturing, we cannot realize and be ourselves. So, whereas all other human feelings are individual emotions, each a necessary component of human experience, kind of like separate stories of a building, bonding channels and integrates them all into one, which creates a foundation upon which the structure of human emotions firmly stands. Bonding is giving all of yourself, not just part of it. It's not one emotion, but all of them. So your side completes the spectrum of the first 6 emotions. The foundation of your side, though, is a little different from an ordinary foundation that we would normally think of. It does not just rest beneath the higher levels of the structure, but it encompasses them all. An effective bedrock of the emotional psyche cannot remain separate, but must include and permeate all of the emotions. Only then can bonding be constructing and everlasting. So your side functions as the connector between all of the Sefirot, the attributes, the qualities which precede it, binds it all together and transmits to the recipient, which is Malchut, the final attribute that's below it. It's similar to the idea of the electricity conductor. When you think of how electricity works through a chain of momentum, as each electrical particle participates until the final charge, creating power. Similarly, the Yesod draws from all the earlier attributes and acts as the link between them and Malchut, which my sister Zelda Vogel from Ealing, UK, will now expound upon.
Following on from all my dear and amazing sisters is really difficult. I have to convince myself of the saying, Kol Shavim Chavivim, that all 7s are precious. I am the 7th child in our precious family of 15. And I heard this expression growing up from my dear father. At the same time, it's also wonderful to follow as I receive all the personality traits they spoke about. You see, the 7th and final emotional attribute is Malchus, which means kingship, royalty, sovereignty. It's unusual and unique in that it is the recipient of each of the 6 qualities that have been discussed and brings them to fulfillment into a distinctive reality, into a new wholeness. Kabbalah describes Malchus as having nothing of its own and compares it to the moon, which reflects back the light it receives from the sun. On the other hand, Malchus is the final emotion which brings the revelation of the divine light for which the entire process began. It was for the purpose of Malchus that all the Sefirot stemmed. Malchus comprises of 2 opposing qualities, exaltness and humility. Our ability to manifest in the world must first absorb who we are. Only then can it shine outwards. This is particularly relevant as we continue to endure this lockdown, where all the things we hold dear have been stripped away. In the absence of the things in life with which we often identify, it all narrows down to who we are behind closed doors. When love, discipline, compassion, endurance, and humility are refined and properly channeled into the psyche through bonding, the result is Malchus. Each of the 6 qualities reflects how God creates, and we experience the ability to become partners in creation with Hashem, with God. This is similar to how the 6 days of the week actively prepare for the 7th blessed and sanctified day, Shabbos, often called the Shabbos Queen, which connects to Malchus. With so many demands tugging at us, we are on a perpetual search for balance in our lives. We are looking to find that miraculous state of equilibrium and harmony that can pull the many facets of our lives inward. Shabbos is the center point, which recollaborates us. Throughout the week, we are in a constant state of conflict, choosing between those elements of our world that we are to embrace and develop, and those that must be rejected and overpowered. But every Shabbos, we enter afresh and take a respite into a cycle of harmony, receptivity, serenity, and peace. Kabbalah expresses this perfectly, stating that it is the source of blessing for the week. Shabbos has always been special for me, but I never looked forward to it until I was older, when I realized the importance, significance, and the rejuvenating effect it has. I can't say the same for some of my children who find aspects of Shabbos difficult, in particular, living away from all family and friends and not being able to be in touch via technology, especially the long British summers where Shabbos can terminate after 10:30 at night. I trust that when they face the real world, it will penetrate that Shabbos is such an absolute gift. Since Shavuos is this Thursday, I'd like to connect it. Let's look at Ruth, who plays a big part in the Shavuos story. She was a princess who came from Malchus, royalty, and whose great-grandson, King David, also was Malchus. She beautifully represents the dichotomy of Malchus because she originated from the lowest of the low, from Lot. She also represents the dichotomy of personality. She overcame her shame, her past, her issues, her challenges, and her feelings. She left the life of a princess and walked the walk of a pauper. Ruth had to think outside of herself. She had to think what was best for others, what was best for the community, and what was best in terms of Hashem. How I understand Malchus in a practical way is thinking what is best for my children and grandchildren, for my community, for Hashem, and not just for myself while I'm engrossed in my challenges and my issues. Doing so will help me to rise above my challenges. Doing so will help me to have simcha, joy, no matter what it is that I'm going through. Doing so will give me emotional energy. Doing so will help me feel like royalty and be a mother of Malchus, of royalty. Boy, do I have a lot of work to reach these goals. I guess it's a life process. So going into Shavuos, let's ask ourselves, do we appreciate our uniqueness as a person and our personal contribution? Do we know that we matter? Are we fulfilling our true aspirations? Let's take a moment and concentrate on ourselves, on our true inner self, not on our performance and how we project to others. And be at peace with ourselves, knowing that God created a very special person. That is you. This is Malchus, the core, the essence of why we're here, to help God and bring redemption achieved through refining the universe by doing mitzvahs. Each of us has the quality of royalty and leadership within us and can make a difference in this world.
Wow. This is after collaboration and sharing notes and ideas. Sisterhood, you rock, everyone. This was amazing. Amazing. A big round of applause. And how do we keep each other going and inspire one another? We have amazing, amazing role models, as I said at the beginning, and we are gifted and blessed to have incredible parents. Now, we're putting them on the spot a little bit. This was a surprise for them that we announced it when we shared the flyer, but we're going to ask them to each share a couple words. My mother will do what mothers do, and our father will share something about his mother. And after that, we will move into another exciting phase for all who want to stay on. So Ma and Ta, we hope we made you proud. And now on to you.
Yes.
London, England.
Well, I think for the first time in my life, I am practically speechless. I cannot get over just the thoughts and the way that these speeches have been given over, and the beauty of listening to it and understanding the concepts. It was just amazing, and the nachas that I feel, and I'm sure that Tati feels the same way, is unbelievable. And we were so proud that you decided to make this whole event in honor of the yahrzeit of Bobby Lou, and you dedicated your presentation to her. And I'm sure that she is climbing, she is getting a huge amount of nachas up there in Shemayim from the fact that her Einiklech are giving over such beautiful concepts. And I'm quite sure that she is rejoicing that her granddaughters are following in her footsteps. And I'm quite sure that I agree with that completely, because that's exactly how I feel, that I am rejoicing, I am in awe, I am just blown away, and so proud of all of you. And thank you for inviting us on.
Me?
Yep.
I echo every word of that. Let me just mention that my mother was born in 1905 in Manhattan, and there were no Jewish schools, and certainly not for girls, in 1910 or 1915 in Manhattan. She went to a public school, she went to Seward Park High School, and got the whole culture. But what defined her was her Jewish identity, her relationship with God and with the people. And this was reflected throughout her life. Namely, you're in the world, there's a lot of good things, but you have to know who you are in order to be able to take those aspects and those things in the world and to craft them to create something which is eternal and meaningful. And tonight, God, thank God, sent me a shidduch, a wife, who embodies those values. And tonight we see our daughters As we just heard, she surely has a lot of nahas because it's people taking the technology and instead of seeing it as a problem or a threat, seeing it as an opportunity to be able to further the ideas of Torah, which we are about to receive, to further all the concepts of everything starting from within yourself, and by going into the deepest, most spiritual aspect of your identity, of your essence, the Chelek Elokah, the divine spark that's in each one of us, and seeing how to cultivate it and to develop it, through that, you're able to help countless people. You're able to help yourself. And you're able to help to fulfill the purpose of all of creation, which is to bring godliness into the world. The world will remain. That's what the redemption will be, when the entire world will be there. But the purpose of Hashem and the essence of God will be revealed. May it happen very soon in our days.
Amen.
And may we all receive the Torah on Shavuos, b'simcha u'b'pnimis, with joy and with inwardness, internalizing the message, and freilich and yontos to everyone.
Amen.
Thank you so much. And just to conclude this formal part of our program, today being Rosh Chodesh, as I said at the beginning, and as some of my sisters mentioned, is the day that, well, besides for it being a holiday for women, let's just remind ourselves, a minor holiday, but an important one. It's also the day that we sang Hallel in the davening, in the prayers of this morning. And Hallel is about praising God and saying thank you. And like so many of the things that my sisters touched upon, gratitude, humility, foundation, kindness, tempered with discipline, harmony and truth, ambition, all of these things coming together as the 7 emotional Sefirot. And as we express gratitude, we thank God for the ability to tap into these channels and to really work on ourselves, because the world is a world of action. We are people of action, and there's always something else to do to become the best person we can be. So as we receive the Torah together, today's the day that 3,332 years ago we gathered together at that mountain. Tomorrow's the day that Moshe came down and offered the Torah to the Jewish people. And this Friday is when we receive the Torah, Shavuos, when God gave us that gift. And we're taught that every year, the Jewish calendar is cyclical, a spiral, I'm sorry, not cyclical. And every year we come back to the same pace, same place, same energies, but on a different level. And the energy of the day of Shavuos is appropriate and powerful for continued decisions in expanding our Jewish knowledge and expanding our learning. It's an excellent opportunity to work on how am I going to improve my Torah for the year, because I'm receiving that gift again. What am I going to do with it? And it's also a time, powerful time in heaven, apparently, that is akin to Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So I hope that we've shared something with you today, all of you. And my sisters might kill me and I might regret this, but I don't think so. Let's use this as a springboard to go further. We don't have to talk about Kabbalah. We could talk about other aspects of Torah, but let's make it our goal that as we receive this new energy again, we're up on the spiral and we commit to develop stronger ties to Torah study and nudge your local Rebbitzin, AKA my fellow sister in each of our communities. My mother also does this. And let's make this Torah, let's have the revelation on the highest level with the coming of Mashiach immediately now.